Committee to order. As permitted by the Governor's Disaster Declaration of May 27, the determination has been made that an in-person meeting is not practical or prudent for this committee. To ensure a transparent and open meeting as possible, we've posted the meeting materials 1 week in advance. We'll provide a recording of this meeting linked on our website, and we'll take all votes by roll call. Kama, will you call the roll?
Of course. Jeff Shriver from CDOT.
Sorry, trouble getting off mute. I'm here. Thank you.
All right. Doug Ferguson from CMAQ.
Here.
Tom Rickert representing the counties.
Here.
Mayor Grasso representing the Council of Mayors. I don't see Chris Schmidt from IDOT.
Present.
Darwin Burkhart from IEPA. And Mark Pitstick representing the RTA.
Here.
Great. Thank you, Kama. Moving on to, that was the call to order. Agenda changes and announcements. Let's see, there were no agenda changes and there don't appear to be any announcements. I would add that the program summary sheets and the obligation goal report was added late to the materials. So maybe not everybody has had a chance, but as those are informational items and are not going to require any sort of vote or anything along those lines, we can discuss a little bit further for those items. Item 3.0, approval of the minutes. Draft minutes from our April 14th meeting were presented. Do I have a motion for approval?
Tom Ricker moves for approval.
Thank you, Tom. And a second?
Jeff Shriver, second.
Thank you, Jeff. Any changes to the minutes as proposed? All right. I'm sorry, did someone say something? All right. Hearing none, Kama, will you do a roll call vote?
Certainly. Jeff from CDOT.
Aye.
Doug from CMAP.
Aye.
Tom Rickert, counties.
Aye.
Chris Schmidt from IDOT.
Aye.
And Mark Pitstick from RTA.
Aye.
And just to verify, Mayor Grasso and Darwin Burkhart have not joined. So motion carries.
Thank you, Kama. Moving on to item 4.0, program monitoring. So for items 4.1 and 4.2, summary sheets have been made available on the website, along with the CMAQ summary and obligations goal report. As far as obligations are concerned, the region has seen a little over 41 million obligated in federal fiscal year 22. We are expecting a couple of large obligations, specifically related to FTA transfers in the next month or so. So while we're not doing great, we're not doing bad either. And with that, are there any questions on that report? I know it was not shared with you in advance, so staff is more than willing to answer questions offline if need be. All right, not hearing any. Moving on to item 5.0, project change requests. There were 8 projects that were submitted for change requests for your consideration today. I'm going to read through all the change requests, and unless there are any individual concerns, I would like to handle them as a single consent vote at the end. But we can stop and as reading through them and ask any questions that are being presented. We do have a couple large cost increases or reinstatements, and I know there are a lot of folks that have joined from those representing agencies. So with that, The first one that was submitted for your consideration was CDOT Streets for Cycling. They're requesting a partial reinstatement of deferred funds in the amount of $3.2 million for the completion of phase 2 for the current phase of this project. This was a multi-phase project that's been going on for several years, and this is the most recent iteration of it. The additional funds will be amended to an existing UIGA that is managed with IDOT, so there shouldn't be any delay in getting those funds amended. Are there any questions concerning the request? All right. The staff recommendation is for reinstatement of the approval for reinstatement of the $3.2 million in CMAQ funding. The second project is the Glenview East Lake Waukegan intersection improvement. The sponsor is requesting a transfer of 72,000 CMAQ from the right-of-way phase to phase 2 engineering, so that portions of the right-of-way acquisition scope can be started during the phase 2, and then an increase of 92,000 CMAQ for phase 2 engineering due to cost increases since the original estimate was created. The project was re-ranked, and the rank remained unchanged at third among the 2020 intersection improvement projects. The staff recommendation is for approval of the transfer of 72,000 from the right-of-way acquisition phase to phase 2 engineering, and an increase of 92,000 for phase 2 engineering. Are there any questions from the committee members on this change request? All right, hearing none, moving on. The next one is Northbrook Metro Station Pace Route Access Improvements. The sponsor requests a schedule change for phase 2 engineering and construction from 2025 to 2023. The sponsor is prepared to move ahead of schedule on the project, and the project includes new shared lane markings surrounding the neighborhood with downtown Northbrook and the Northbrook Metro Station. It also includes the installation of bike parking at the commuter parking lot. The staff recommendation is to approve the schedule change for phase 2 engineering and construction from 2025 to 2023. Are there any questions from the committee on this request? All right, hearing none, we'll keep moving on. The next is the Cook County Forest Preserve District, the Des Plaines River Trail improvements. The sponsors request a schedule change and a transfer of funds between a different segment of the project that is also funded with CMAQ funding to the Bryn Mawr from segment 3, which is from Bryn Mawr to Lawrence, which is being led by the Forest Preserve District. For the schedule change, the funds for construction would be moved from 2024 to 2022 to accommodate an August authorization date. For the transfer of funds, the sponsor would like to move 306.5 thousand in CMAQ from segment 4 to segment 3 due to increased costs and estimates. This would bring the total for the segment 3 to 6,374,900 CMAQ for construction and construction engineering in 2022 with the schedule change. The recommendation of staff is to approve the schedule change and the transfer of 306.5 thousand from segment 4 to segment 3. Are there any questions on this request? All right, hearing none. The next one is for the Forest Preserve District of DuPage County, West Branch DuPage River Trail connection. The sponsor is requesting a cost increase of 23,000 TAP for phase 2 engineering and 1.2 million for for TAP for construction and construction engineering. Construction cost change is due to inflation from 2026 and in delays in initiating phase 2 engineering and just general material and labor cost increases over that time. The staff recommendation is for approval of the cost increase of a little over 1.2 million in TAP for phase 2 engineering and construction engineering. Are there any questions from the committee on this project? All right, hearing none. Next, we have Aurora Montgomery Road and Hill Avenue intersection improvement. The sponsor is requesting a scope change to expand the project limits along the east leg of Montgomery Road to connect to an improved three-lane section of Montgomery Road that begins approximately 500 feet east of Farnsworth Avenue. A cost increase of $232,804 in CMAQ for phase 2 engineering and $2,249,607 CMAQ for construction and construction engineering, and a schedule change moving right of way from 2022 to 2023 and construction engineering from 23 to 2024. The scope change is being requested to provide continuity of the transportation infrastructure that enhances operational efficiency and provides additional capacity for the projected traffic volumes and enhanced roadway safety along Montgomery Road corridor. The project extension is needed to meet current capacity needs and provide safe travel conditions and better accommodation for bicycles and pedestrians. The cost increase is a result of the scope change. The project was reevaluated and re-ranked, and the rank dropped from 4th to 6th, behind one unfunded project, but ahead of 2 funded projects that were among the 2020 intersection improvements. Staff is recommending approval of the scope change to include the eastern section of Montgomery Road to 500 feet east of Farnsworth Avenue, and the cost increase of $232,804 CMAQ for phase 2 engineering and $2,249,607 CMAQ for construction and construction engineering. That was a mouthful. Are there any additional questions from the committee on this project? No. All right. And moving on, the next is the King County multi-use path for Doberman Road extension. The sponsor is requesting a schedule change to move TAP-L construction funds from 2023 to 2022. The county was able to complete the right-of-way acquisition phase earlier than anticipated, and the project is expecting right-of-way certification in August, and has submitted all plans that meet the schedule for the September 23rd letting. Staff recommendation is to approve the schedule change to move up $1,384,800 in TAP funding for construction and construction engineering from 2023 to 2022. Are there any change or questions from the committee members on this request? All right. The last request is Will County Bell Road at 143rd Street. The sponsor has requested a reinstatement of $10,384,000 CMAQ for construction and construction engineering from deferral. The right-of-way acquisition on the last parcel is being finalized, and the county anticipates having right-of-way certified in time for the September 2022 letting. The staff recommendation is for approval of the reinstatement of $10,384,000 CMAQ for construction and construction engineering. Are there any questions from the committee on this request? All right. Well, so that was quite a few requests. There, at the beginning of the memo, there is a table showing what those overall changes are. It does show that the unprogrammed balance would go further into the negative, but as stated previously, this is due to advanced construction on projects that are already existing. We currently in the region have about 73 million sitting in advanced construction. And while we do anticipate that these projects or some of the advanced construction will be converted at some point in time, it's unlikely that it's going to be converted all in FY 2022. And all of these changes, as they go to letting, will go into AC status first prior to being converted to an actual federal obligation. So with that, are there any additional questions from the committee on all these changes?
Doug, Pitstick motions to approve the requested changes as recommended by staff.
Thank
Tom
you, Mark.
Ricker seconds.
Thank you, Tom. All right, we have a motion on the table for approval of the changes as presented. Kama, would you call the roll?
Of course. Jeff Shriver from CDOT,
Yes.
Doug Ferguson, CMAQ,
Yes.
Tom Rickert representing the counties,
Yes.
Chris Schmidt from IDOT.
Yep.
And Mark Pitstick from the RTA.
Yes.
All right, the changes pass. Thank you. Moving on to 6.0. So staff continues to prepare for the upcoming call for projects, which is scheduled to open in January 2023. And we have a few items that we'd like to discuss with you, potential changes to the administration of the program in the call for projects, and also potential change to the scoring. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Kama to discuss the preliminary engineering requirements. There was a memo that was included in the materials, but I'll let Kama go through that.
All right. Good morning again, everyone. Staff is, as shown in the memo in your packet, staff is proposing making some modest additions to the application booklet language to continue to clarify what is meant by substantially complete with regard to our requirements for preliminary engineering to be substantially complete in order to apply for funding for projects in the CMAQ, TAPL, and STP shared fund programs. So specifically, the language additions clarify that the environmental impacts, including 4F parks and other properties, Section 106 of the Historic Preservation Act, those should be identified, and review agencies should have reviewed sponsors' intent to minimize, mitigate, or avoid these impacts in order to meet that substantially complete definition. So this would apply to both projects processed through IDOT as well as projects to be included in an FTA grant. And so the language updates were made in both sections of the application booklet. Additionally, because there's been an increased interest in this region in pursuing the use of the Planning and Environmental Linkages process, or the PEL process, which is being used for some of the more complex projects such as highway rail grade separations. Staff's also proposing with this language that completion of that process, which mirrors kind of pre-NEPA process, would also meet that substantially complete definition. So again, that language is in your packet. We did discuss this a little bit earlier this morning at the STP project selection committee. And one comment that was noted there is, we understand why having phase one engineering substantially complete in order to apply for funding makes sense, but also thinking about whether we need to recognize somewhere in the methodologies the fact that we're applying for funding in out years, having your phase one design approval, for example, secured now. You're probably going to have to refresh some of the the clearances between the time of application and the time that you move on to those later phases, and kind of whether there was anything we wanted to add to the language to address that. So kind of looking for committee comments here on the language changes. We do think they're relatively modest and just putting into words what our practice has been as we review applications. So interested in your comments or questions.
Yeah, Tom.
Yeah, I just wanted to just ask about, all comments being addressed and the ESR. This is a onslaught of projects that IDOT has to review and dig into. And I guess I'm just concerned about just making sure that there's a process in place that will help to ensure that there are comments that are received and the ESR. Again, there's so many projects that are submitted within the time frame that these phase ones need to be substantially complete, and I just think we need to also consider that there may be some difficulty addressing all comments as well as a final ESR within a certain time frame to meet these requirements. So I don't know if I don't know if I'm opposed to any of this. I might call and ask some questions offline or just check in with IDOT staff. Historically, IDOT has taken into consideration some of the things I'm mentioning here, and I want to make sure that continues to occur.
Yeah, for sure, Tom. And I think that, you're absolutely right. Things do get kind of stacked up ahead of an application deadline, which is not ideal. And, in a perfect world, these phase ones, should be in progress already for projects looking to apply in the next call for project cycle so that they aren't all lumped together. I think we have to recognize not everything goes through. Some of the ESR items are, no impact, no impact, no impact, and there's only one item on a particular project. Part of this language clarification came from, an observation during the last call for project cycle that, the language at that time read, "You must have submitted your draft PDR." And we saw a lot of draft PDR submissions that had just blank sections of that draft. And so feeling like, you need to have gone through some of these steps and we know that the sections are very standardized, right? It comes off of a standard IDOT form. So, having blank sections in your draft is not substantially complete. It is really what this is aimed at addressing. So, if we need to tweak this language a little further to, maybe not say 100% addressed, or, we can work on tweaking the language a little bit, but really that was the intent, was to ensure that, a draft PDR means, we're 90% done, not 10% done, and just turning it in to check a box. So.
Thanks for the clarification. I understand, and I do recall some of those projects that I was like, wow. So I do know where you're coming from, where CMAP is coming from, and so yeah, it might. I'll talk to the other counties, or we might want to just look at and with IDOT on potential tweaking of the language. But I understand now what you're looking at.
Sounds good, Tom, and I look forward to your input as we tweak that going forward for approval of final language in the fall.
Yeah, and Tom, I'll share a Word version. I mean, if there's any language that you think would be better, feel free to shoot us back, like the actual changes you would like to see. Because sometimes I know staff, we don't always get everything exactly 100% as everybody else like referenced it. I know Kama did an excellent job in trying to use all the proper titles and the different reports and everything along those lines, but any help is appreciated. Are there any other questions? Yeah, Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Doug and Kama. I did review the last paragraph regarding transit projects. I checked on those referenced federal regs just to make sure I knew it was in there, and I don't see any problems from the transit side with this recommended changes, although I do see that my colleagues Brian Stepp at Metro and Dave Tomzik at Pace, and maybe there's somebody from CTA on today, and I'd ask them to jump in if they have any concerns about that language. If they don't, they can keep quiet, I guess.
Yeah, so if Brian or Dave, if you guys have any comments on this, and even if you don't have them today, feel free to shoot them to us offline. Would be helpful as well.
Yeah, Mark, thanks for pointing that out and looking it up. But yeah, that's the process that we're following now anyway on our projects with the CE. You know, it makes sense that we're following the regulations and setting it up. So I guess the one question is, do we need the approval, the letter from the FTA stating that it is a categorical exclusion at that point, which probably would happen anyway if we were following that process? I just, that's just a minor detail.
Yeah,
but,
I think, Dave, it would be great to have it, or to have a draft from our partners at FTA of their intent to issue that letter. You know, just like with the IDOT process. I mean, we send a list of applications and the applicant's reported status to IDOT. We do the same with FTA, and so even if that letter hasn't been issued, if FTA confirms that it's their intent to issue it, I think that would be just fine.
Okay, yeah, because the process starts way before that, even, discussing with the FTA as to our intent of going after the CE and going through the project definition and developing those costs. So yeah, I think it will work for us.
I agree that I think we can show that we've had substantial conversations with FTA, and we might not have the actual CE confirmation, but we can show that we've been having the conversations and are working towards that. As you noted, that the time gap between when a project might be in the CMAQ program and when it might be funded, or in the STB shared fund, that's where we'll have more of our station projects. The 106 sign off is usually only good for about 2 years. So we'll have that issue to work through. If we go all the way to completion and get the 106 sign off, we'll only have 2 years before that'll expire. And so we'll have to refresh that at the time that we're moving into construction. That might not be so much of an issue for Metro, at least on the CMAQ side, if we're doing diesel emission reduction projects with our locomotives. That's just kind of more of a simple CE there.
Yeah, this is Keith Brewer from CDOT. Section 106, I think, is the same area where I was a little bit concerned. So we may want to do some more online checking about post-meeting conversations about how to address where that comes to the process, especially on projects that are documented categorical exclusion rather than a simple categorical exclusion as well. So that's the one issue we may want to keep looking at.
For sure. Thank you both for those comments. And it really is, strengthening this language in part comes out of some experience with a transit project in the shared fund, where the agency was maybe not anticipating having a Section 106 issue and wound up having one, and is really stretching the limits of their obligation deadline extension in the shared fund. And so wanting to make sure that at least due diligence has been done on what those potential for impact is, and that's reflected in the project schedule and reflected in the project budget. So, that's the main purpose of having preliminary engineering done in order to apply, is to make sure that, we're programming on something that is a solid schedule and a solid cost estimate. So,
and
there's definitely language flexibility here.
And I think it may be a consideration of requirements based on what year it goes into the program. Things that may have an additional step won't go into the first two, will stay out the very first years of the program, which usually we're not dealing with at CMAQ anyway. Usually we're dealing with years 4 and 5, but perhaps you look at timing in that as we go forward and refine this.
Yeah, and that came up earlier this morning under STP as well, and thinking about, the quarterly status updating that's done on all of these projects, and, could we insert a checkpoint somewhere when funding for construction is, say, 2 years out or 1 year out? If these clearances haven't been finalized by then, do we then consider, moving that construction funding out another year or something similar? So I think we'll be exploring that from the conversation this morning as well.
Okay.
Well, thanks everybody for sharing your comments. As I mentioned, staff are willing to hear any other thoughts you have in the coming months as we look to kind of get this wrapped up for the fall. But are there any last comments or questions of Kama before I let her go? All right, well, thank you. And for 6.0, we want to talk a little bit about the inclusive growth regional scoring, regional priority scoring that we have. And today, John Hudsma will kind of go through some of the stuff that we've been looking at with regard to the Justice 40 initiative. And with that, I'll turn it over to John.
Thanks, Doug. Hi, everyone. My name is John Hodsma. I'm part of the TIP team here over at CMAP. So included in today's packet, you should have all received a memo regarding a preliminary staff proposal to add an additional 10 points to the inclusive growth scoring category using the U.S. Department of Transportation's Justice 40 disadvantaged communities tool. And that is for both the CMAQ and TAP-L programs. So just to give some brief background on Justice 40, this is a goal that was established through President Biden's executive order that was signed on January 27, 2021, and stating that 40% of overall federal investments in climate and clean energy programs go towards disadvantaged communities. And so to aid agencies in achieving this goal, USDOT created a disadvantaged community tool to be used for covered programs. And the USDOT disadvantaged community tool uses 22 total indicators that are then grouped into 6 categories, as you can see here on the slide, which include transportation access, health, environment, economic resilience, and equity disadvantage. So each of the 6 categories is scored as either a 0 or a 1 for a combined score ranging from 0 to 6. And this tool looks at this census tract level. So within each category, if a census tract is at or above the 50th percentile of disadvantage, it is then considered disadvantaged in that category and receives a 1 score, where if it's below, then it would receive a 0. One thing to note, the resilience category is the exception here, in that that category takes a 75th percentile threshold to receive that 1 and be considered disadvantaged. And then in total, as I said, it ranges from 0 to 6. All those categories get grouped into 1 score. If the census tract has 4 or more categories at or above the necessary threshold, it is considered to be disadvantaged. So if we move to the next slide, here's what the tool looks like at a regional level, with the gold color being representing areas that are considered disadvantaged. And then if we move on to the next slide here, you can see a closer look, and if you click on a census tract, you get the box to the left there that pops up, and it shows you each of the 6 categories, and it's scored as a 0 or 1. And I'll go ahead and post here in the chat that link that will take you to the landing page where you can look a little more if you want to explore. So on to the next slide here. With the assumptions that CMAQ and TAP-L programs will be considered covered programs under Justice 40, and also considering, you know, equity being a core value of CMAP, staff is proposing to incorporate the level of community disadvantage within the inclusive growth category. So this would be in addition to existing scoring criteria of percent of travelers using a facility that are people of color below the poverty line, which would maintain its 10 points. And then the second proposal comes in terms of allocating those 10 points, which staff recommends points to be awarded by the number of disadvantaged categories that a census tract has identified in that USDOT disadvantaged community tool. So we can see a breakdown of that if we move on to the next slide. And so in a census tract, if it has, if it scores all 6 categories as a 1, it would receive 10 points. Now, if it had 5 of the 6 categories, it would be 7 points. And if it had 4 of the 6 categories, right now we're thinking about giving it, we'd be giving it 4 points. And then anything under 4, since it's not considered by USDOT's measures as disadvantaged, those would all be 0. And if we advance to the next slide, we can see how that looks like in from a whole program perspective. So maintaining that 100 points, staff proposes moving the air quality cost effectiveness score from 60 points to 50 points for that CMAQ program. And then for the TAPL program, moving market for facility and safety and attractiveness rating scores from its current 25 points down to 20 points. So as I said earlier, this is just kind of made for discussion today. So if, you know, we're happy to hear your thoughts or answer any questions about this right now. So thanks.
Thanks, John. So as John mentioned, this is just a proposal, and we realized we needed to start somewhere to have a discussion, and felt that it was best to put something on the table. But we really would like to hear your thoughts as a committee. So with that, are there any questions or comments on this proposed idea? You're on mute, Mark.
I just have a simple question for you, John. Can you go back a couple of the tables? Let's see. Keep going.
To there, or?
No, to one of the tables that's like one of the early slides.
I believe
that one. In the economic category, there's a number of things listed there, most of which I understand how those could be measured. Except the last one is high inequality. I'm not sure how you measure high inequality. I know this isn't your thing. This is probably from the regs, but can you explain that, or somebody?
I not at the moment. I can try looking for it here and getting back to you on that. Doug, if you have an answer to that right now,
it's not a big deal. Just a curiosity.
Yeah. I do know if you go to the landing page that John sent, there's a lot more documentation on how USDOT picked and choose these different areas. We can look into it and get back to you as far as how they define high inequality.
Okay.
But we don't have an answer for you right now.
Okay.
I could put John Donovan on the spot and ask him, but I have a feeling he's going to give me the same answer that I just did.
Yeah, and just as a comment, I was clicking on some census tracts, you know, and interestingly, most census tracts do show up as disadvantaged in 1 or 2 of the categories, but not a lot of them. So that I think your scoring makes sense to really not kick in until you're pretty high up on the scale there. That seems to be a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, So right now, the only program that's required to follow this, as far as funds, currently is the EV program. They haven't pushed it down for any additional fund sources, but there's a very good chance that CMAQ could fall under this because of its climate and air quality goals. So we kind of wanted to get ahead of the curve on this a little bit. And we realized that there may be changes to this tool or what is considered to be a Justice 40 community. And we'll just have to adapt with that. But we thought it was a good start. And in getting to some of the goals that ONTO 2050 has and the CMAP agency with regard to equity. So.
And Doug, this is Chris from IDOT. To your point, the feds have not given us, this is maybe more my personal comment than the Department of Transportation's, but accurate description on how to implement Justice 40 when it comes to the EV program. So I commend you guys on this attempt. We still don't know what that looks like. So I think any idea of trying to implement it is great. And I think you're thinking that it might be brought into CMAQ once it's better defined is probably pretty accurate.
Thanks, Chris. Are there any other questions or comments on this proposal?
Yeah, I think I was just going to make a comment that this does seem like a good approach, at least to start looking at it, just like Chris said. Mark got my first question answered. I started looking at the census tracts, and it looks like most of the areas do start hitting the criteria for the areas of concern that I personally would have. So it looks like that this would be a good tool.
Great. And I'm going to go to the kind of the overall points that we're kind of proposing. I mean, I just want to see if there's any comments on this. Do we need to go back to the drawing board, or is everybody kind of comfortable with this? Any comments on this area?
I mean, I originally probably would have said something about why we're taking all of them out of air quality, but when you look at that first chart, you notice there's the health benefit there. I mean, it's a little bit of double counting if we were to just take it all from transportation impact criteria, but it sort of follows the spirit of the program, I guess. Disadvantaged communities disproportionately being affected by this stuff.
Thank you. Anything else? And so please, as with the phase 1 engineering requirement, if you have any additional comments as you talk to either Tom, the other county engineers, or any of your staff, we'd like to hear them before we come back with a final proposal for your consideration. Not sure if that'll be the September 1st meeting or the later meeting in, I believe it's November. I'll have to double check on that. But our goal here would be to come back with a final proposal for your consideration for the scoring change. So thank you. Moving on to 7.0, other business. So CMAP doesn't have any other business at this point in time, or is there any other business that the committee wishes or members wish to bring before the committee? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to public comment. So we did not receive any public comment in advance of the meeting. If there's anybody in the audience that wishes to address the committee, please unmute yourself, and I just would ask you to identify your name and who you're representing. And yeah, that's, or you can place something in the chat if you wish. All right, I'm not seeing anybody or hearing anybody, so I'm going to assume that there's no one wishes to make a public comment. All right, moving on to next item, next meeting. So the next meeting is scheduled for Thursday, September 1st at 11 a.m. And with that, there's no other more business before the committee. Do I have a motion for adjournment?
Motion to adjourn. Christian, IDOT.
Thanks, Chris. Do I have a second?
Mark Pitstick seconds.
Thanks, Mark. For this purpose, we're only going to do a voice vote. All those in favor to adjourn?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.